Hey guys, tonight we're going way back, like chariot and bronze sword back, to talk about a little dust-up you might have heard of the Trojan War. Now, when you picture ancient heroes, you probably imagine ripped dudes with perfect abs and unwavering courage. And yeah, some of that was probably true. But let me tell you, this whole Trojan War thing, it was less epic movie montage and more like a really long and exhausting group project where everyone ends up hating each other. Seriously, the emotional baggage alone could sink a trireme. You're about to see how even the mightiest heroes were basically just trying to keep it together amidst a whole lot of divine meddling and human error. Spoiler alert, most of them didn't succeed spectacularly. You, on the other hand, are just trying to drift off to sleep, which, frankly, sounds way more appealing than anything these guys went through. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know, down in the comments, where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Always curious to see where in the world you are all winding down. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself, not in a dusty history book, but right there, at a rather lavish, albeit slightly awkward, wedding. Picture this, it's a scene of supposed joy, the marriage of King Peleus and the sea nymph Thetis. The guest list is basically the VIPs of the ancient Greek world. Kings, queens, demigods, the works. There's probably some decent finger food, maybe some lyre music that's just a tad too loud, and that general buzz of polite conversation you get at any large gathering. You're mingling, perhaps sipping some watered-down wine because, let's be real, they didn't have Napa Valley back then, and trying to avoid that one uncle who always tells the same boring stories. Everything seems normal, until it isn't. Suddenly, a hush falls over the crowd. Not a respectful hush, mind you, but the kind of silence that descends when someone drops a tray full of expensive pottery. Because who should appear, uninvited and radiating serious bad vibes, but Eris, the goddess of discord. Apparently, she didn't make the guest list, a social faux pas of epic proportions. Now, Eris isn't exactly known for her chill demeanour, true to form. She doesn't just sulk in a corner, she throws a metaphorical and literal bomb into the party in the form of a golden apple, engraved on it, in elegant ancient Greek script, are the words, "To the fairest." Cue the dramatic music if they had dramatic music back then, which they didn't, but you get the idea immediately. The atmosphere shifts from slightly stuffy wedding reception to full-blown reality TV drama. Three goddesses: Hera, queen of the gods and wife of Zeus; Athena, goddess of wisdom and warfare; and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty, all eye that golden apple like it's the last slice of pizza. Each one is absolutely convinced it belongs to her. You can almost feel the tension in the air. Hera probably gives off that powerful, regal aura, the kind that makes you straighten your posture even when she's not looking directly at you. Athena likely emanates an intense, intelligent energy, like she's already strategizing 10 moves ahead. And Aphrodite, well, she's probably just effortlessly radiant, the kind of person who makes everyone else feel a little underdressed. Now, Zeus, king of the gods and generally not one for making tough decisions when they involve upsetting powerful women, wisely ducks out of this one. He's like, nope, not touching that with a 10-foot lightning bolt. Instead, he delegates the unenviable task of judging this divine beauty pageant to a mortal man, a shepherd named Paris. You might be thinking, a shepherd seriously? And yeah, it sounds a bit random, but Paris wasn't just any shepherd. He was actually a prince of Troy, exposed as an infant due to a prophecy that he would bring about the city's downfall. So, he's out in the countryside, probably smelling of sheep and not expecting his day to involve deciding which goddess is the hottest. The three goddesses descend upon poor Paris, and you can imagine the pressure he's under. It's not like he can just say, "You know what? You're all lovely in your own way. No, he has to pick one. And being goddesses, they don't exactly play fair. Each one tries to bribe him with promises. Hera offers him political power and dominion over all men. Athena tempts him with wisdom and military prowess. And Aphrodite, well, Aphrodite offers him the most beautiful woman in the world as his wife. Now, put yourself in Paris's sandals for a moment. You're a prince, albeit one currently living the simple life. Suddenly, you have three incredibly powerful beings offering you things that most mortals can only dream of. Power, wisdom, or the love of the most beautiful woman. It's a tough choice, especially when the most beautiful woman in the world is Helen, the wife of King Menelaus of Sparta. Oops, Paris. Perhaps swayed by the promise of love, or maybe he just had a type, chooses Aphrodite. Hera and Athena are not amused. In fact, they are royally ticked off. This divine snub sets the stage for some serious grudge holding, the kind that can fester for years and involve the destruction of entire cities. Remember this moment, because this seemingly simple act of choosing a fairest goddess is the pebble that starts a centuries-long avalanche of trouble. Now, fast forward a bit. You're back in your role as an observer, watching Paris as he travels to Sparta. He's there as a guest of King Menelaus, enjoying the renowned Spartan hospitality, which, let's be honest, probably involved a lot of stoic silence and intense physical training demonstrations. But Paris has an agenda, and it involves making good on Aphrodite's promise. Helen, the woman in question, is said to have a face that could launch 1,000 ships. Whether this is literal or just a really impressive metaphor is something historians still debate. Was she otherworldly beautiful? Did the poets just get a little carried away? It's one of those historical mysteries that keeps academics employed. Regardless, by all accounts, she was stunning. You witness the interactions between Paris and Helen. Perhaps there's an undeniable spark, a mutual attraction fueled by Aphrodite's influence. Or maybe Paris is just really persuasive, and Helen is, well, maybe she's looking for a bit of excitement in her presumably comfortable, but possibly predictable royal life. It's hard to say for sure, thousands of years later, what their motivations truly were. But the result is undeniable. Helen leaves with Paris, whether willingly or otherwise another point of historical contention. By the way, she abandons her husband, her kingdom, and her responsibilities to sail away with this charming Trojan prince, and she takes with her not just herself, but also a considerable amount of treasure, because apparently, if you're going to elope, you might as well make it worth your while. King Menelaus, understandably, is furious. He's been betrayed, his honour has been insulted, and his wife, the most beautiful woman in the world, no less one has been stolen. He doesn't just stew in silence, though. He turns to his powerful brother, Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, for help. Agamemnon is a man who knows how to rally the troops. He's ambitious, he's influential, and he's not one to back down from a fight, especially when it involves family honour and the potential for expanding his own power. He sees this as an opportunity to unite the various Greek kingdoms under his leadership, and to teach the Trojans a lesson they won't soon forget. You watch as messengers are sent out across the land, travelling from city-state to city-state, carrying the call to arms. Kings and princes, heroes and warriors, all are summoned to join the expedition to retrieve Helen and avenge Menelaus' honour. It's like the ancient Greek version of a mass group text, but with more heralds and fewer emojis. Now, here's a little historical tidbit for you. The concept of Greece as a unified nation didn't really exist back then. Instead, there were numerous independent city-states, each with its own king, its own army, and its own set of interests. Getting all these fiercely independent entities to agree on anything, let alone a major military campaign, was a feat in itself. This is why Agamemnon's ability to assemble such a large coalition speaks volumes about his influence and the perceived gravity of the situation. As the various armies begin to gather, you see the faces of legendary figures, men who will become the heroes and villains of countless stories. There's Odysseus, the cunning king of Ithaca. Known for his intelligence and silver tongue, you'll hear plenty more about him later. Trust me. There's Nestor, the wise old king of Pylos, full of experience and sage advice, though sometimes a bit long-winded. And of course, there's Achilles, the seemingly invincible warrior, the son of a goddess, and arguably the greatest fighter of his generation. Achilles is a complicated character. He's fiercely proud, incredibly skilled in battle, and driven by a thirst for glory. But he's also prone to fits of rage and has a deep-seated need for recognition. His presence alone is enough to intimidate the Trojans and inspire the Achaean Greek forces. You can feel the raw power emanating from him, the sense that he's a force of nature on the battlefield. The sheer scale of the assembled Achaean forces is impressive. Ships are being dragged onto the beaches, provisions are being gathered, and the air is filled with the sounds of marching feet, clanging armour, and the excited and perhaps anxious chatter of thousands of men. It's a logistical nightmare. You can imagine. Feeding and supplying such a massive army would have been a monumental undertaking. You almost feel bad for the quartermasters. But despite the impressive display of force, there's an underlying sense of unease. This isn't just a quick raid to snatch back a runaway spouse. This is a full-scale military expedition to a distant land, and no one really knows how long it will last or what the cost will be. You can see the apprehension in the eyes of some of the soldiers, the quiet goodbyes exchanged with the loved ones before they set sail. And so, the stage is set. A stolen woman, a broken oath of hospitality, the pride of kings, and the meddling of vengeful goddesses have all conspired to launch 1,000 ships across the Aegean Sea. You are about to embark on a decade-long journey, witnessing acts of incredible bravery, devastating loss, and the slow, agonizing erosion of the very ideals these heroes supposedly represent. Get comfortable, because this is going to be a long night. The world you're a part of now is a bustling, chaotic port. Imagine the ancient Greek equivalent of a military base during a massive mobilization. Thousands of men have answered the call to arms, and they've all converged on the shores of Aulis. The air is thick with the smell of salt, pine tar, and the nervous energy of an army on the brink of war. You can hear the constant clang of smiths hammering bronze into armour, the shouts of men hauling supplies, and the low hum of thousands of conversations all happening at once. It's a sensory overload. And you just want to lie down and take a nap. But you can't. You're bound to this place by a promise, an ancient oath that, frankly, you probably didn't think you'd ever have to make good on. This is the story behind the solemn promise that brought all these kings and warriors together, a long time ago, before Helen was even born. Her father, King Tyndareus, was a little worried about who she would marry. You see, Helen was so beautiful that every eligible king and prince in the Greek world wanted her hand. Tyndareus was afraid that if he chose one suitor, all the others would get angry and start a war. A very sensible fear. As it turns out, so, he made a deal. All the suitors had to swear a solemn oath that they would defend Helen's chosen husband from any man who might try to steal her. This is a common historical fact, that this oath of Tyndareus was what bound all the Greek leaders together. It was a brilliant, if ultimately flawed, piece of political manoeuvring. You can picture it: a bunch of puffed-up kings, probably a little tipsy on wine, all raising their hands and swearing a dramatic oath, thinking it was just a formality. Little did they know, they were signing up for a decade-long military expedition. So here you are, a king or maybe a lesser noble. It's hard to tell from this vantage point, staring at a sea full of ships. You're here because you swore an oath, and oaths in this world are serious business, backed by the gods themselves. To break one would be a social and spiritual disaster. It's a pretty grim feeling, being forced into a war over a woman you've probably never even met, just because of a promise you made to her father many years ago. It's the ancient Greek version of a contract you signed when you were young and foolish, and now you're being forced to fulfill the terms. Not everyone was thrilled to be here, though. Take the famously clever King Odysseus of Ithaca. He really didn't want to go. He knew this war was going to be long, brutal, and bad for business. Plus, he had a brand new baby son, Telemachus, and a wife he was madly in love with. He wanted nothing to do with it. So, he came up with a cunning plan to get out of it. When Agamemnon's messenger came to get him, Odysseus pretended to have gone mad. This is a really quirky, lesser-known detail about the war's beginnings. He hitched a donkey and an ox to a plough, put on a ridiculous hat, and started ploughing his fields while sowing salt instead of seeds. He was trying to look completely unhinged. The messenger, Palamedes, a guy who was also known for his cunning, wasn't fooled. He took Telemachus, the baby, and placed him right in front of the plough. Odysseus, a father before he was a king or a warrior, had to stop the plough to save his son. The jig was up. His feigned madness was exposed, and he had to go to war. It's a bittersweet moment. You admire his ingenuity, but you feel for him as he has to kiss his wife and son goodbye, knowing he might never see them again. Then there's Achilles, the greatest warrior of them all. His story is a little different. His mother, the sea nymph Thetis, knew the prophecy her son could either live a long, peaceful life and be forgotten, or go to Troy, die young, and achieve eternal glory, being a good, if slightly overprotective, mother. She chose the long life. So, she hid him away on the island of Skyros, disguised as a girl, living among the daughters of King Lycomedes. It was a very sneaky, and also probably awkward, situation. But a prophet had revealed that Troy could not be taken without Achilles, so Odysseus was sent to find him. Odysseus, ever the clever one, brought gifts for the girls' jewellery, clothing, and, tucked away in a pile, a magnificent shield and a spear. When a fake alarm was sounded, all the girls ran for the jewellery, but Achilles, driven by his warrior instincts, grabbed the spear and shield. His cover was blown. He had to go to war, a path that led directly to his glorious, but tragically short, destiny. So here you are, with all these heroes, all these kings, all these thousands of men, finally gathered. The fleet is a marvel to behold, a veritable forest of mass against the sky. The plan is simple: sail to Troy, take the city, get Helen back, and then go home. It's all very straightforward in theory, but theory and practice, as you're about to see, are two very different things. The first problem arises immediately. The winds, they just don't blow. For days, then weeks, and then months, the ships are stuck. The sails hang limp, the sea is an unnervingly calm mirror, and the entire fleet is going nowhere. The men grow restless. Supplies start to run low. What was supposed to be a quick expedition is turning into a protracted, frustrating waiting game. Morale plummets. You can see the men getting antsy. Their conversations turning from boasts of glory to grumbles about the lack of progress and the terrible food. It's the kind of stalemate that makes you want to lie down on the beach and just give up. Agamemnon, the commander-in-chief, is under immense pressure. He's the one who's supposed to get this show on the road. The whole enterprise rests on his shoulders. The fleet is stuck, and no amount of yelling or sacrificing livestock seems to be helping. Something is clearly wrong, and it's not just the weather. Finally, a soothsayer, a prophet named Calchas, is called upon to figure out what's going on. The news is not good. He reveals that the goddess Artemis is angry. You see, a while back, Agamemnon had made a boastful comment about being a better hunter than Artemis. A big mistake. You just don't say that to a goddess of the hunt. And now, she's retaliated by holding the winds captive, preventing the fleet from sailing. She demands to sacrifice Agamemnon's own daughter, the young princess Iphigenia. This is a gut-wrenching moment. You can feel the tension as the news spreads through the camp. The king, the man who rallied all of you, is being asked to kill his own child for the good of the army. It's a choice no one should ever have to make. At first, Agamemnon refuses. He's a father, after all. But the pressure from his army is immense. The men are on the verge of mutiny. Their honour is on the line, and they want to go home or go to war. Anything but this endless waiting. The other kings probably whisper in his ear, reminding him of his duty to the alliance. It's a classic example of how the personal and the political intertwine in this brutal ancient world. In a desperate, heartbreaking move, Agamemnon sends a message to his wife, Clytemnestra. Back in Mycenae, he tells her to send Iphigenia to Aulis, pretending that she is to be married to the great hero Achilles. Poor Iphigenia arrives, excited about her supposed marriage, only to find the truth she is not there for a wedding, but for a sacrifice. This is a truly awful trick, and it shows you how even a king's honour can break under the immense pressure of command. What happens next is something that historians still debate. The most famous version of the story is that Agamemnon, with a heavy heart, performs the sacrifice. The knife is raised. The entire army watches in grim silence. And then, a miracle happens. Just as the knife is about to strike, Artemis, perhaps moved by pity, swaps Iphigenia for a deer. Iphigenia is spirited away to serve as a priestess in the land of the Taurians, and the winds finally start to blow. But another, more brutal version of the myth suggests that she was indeed sacrificed, and her death became a source of an unyielding vengeance that would haunt Agamemnon for the rest of his life. We'll never know for sure, but either way, the scene is a heavy one, and it stains the very beginning of the war with tragedy. It's a sobering reminder that even before a single battle is fought, heroes are already being broken. The cost of this war is already mounting. The mood on the ships as you finally set sail is a strange mixture of grim determination and immense relief. The long wait is over. The seemingly impossible barrier has been overcome, but at a terrible price. The wind fills the sails, and the massive fleet begins to move, 1,000 ships stretching across the horizon. You can feel the gentle sway of the ship beneath your feet, the rhythmic creak of the wood, and the steady rush of the water as you glide across the sea. The days and nights blend into a hazy, dreamlike passage. You're a part of this massive floating city, heading towards a destination that has become more a grim promise than an exciting adventure. You look at the sea, at the distant horizon, and you wonder what awaits you on the other side. You've heard the stories of the mighty walls of Troy, of its great hero Hector, and of the powerful Trojan army, but those are just stories. The reality, will be far more complicated, far more brutal, and far more exhausting than you can possibly imagine. The sun sets, casting a golden glow on the water, and you drift off, not quite to sleep, but into a state of tired anticipation, waiting for the war to finally begin. You've been at sea for a long time. The rocking of the ship has become a second heartbeat. The endless horizon a familiar, if slightly unsettling, sight. Days turn into weeks, and weeks into months. The initial excitement has long since faded, replaced by a quiet, grinding exhaustion. You're just a speck in a vast fleet, all heading in the same direction. 1,000 ships pointed toward a city you've never seen, all for an oath you barely remember swearing. Then, one day, there's a cry from the lookout. Land. A cheer ripples through the fleet, a wave of relief and renewed purpose. The ships make their way to the shore, and you and your fellow warriors, eager to finally get this over with, jump into the water and wade onto the beach. You've finally arrived. You look around, at the fortified city in the distance, and the men immediately begin to do what they've been trained to do: raid, pillage, and start a fight. But there's a problem. This isn't Troy, it's Mysia, a neighbouring kingdom. You've gone and started a war in the wrong place. It's the ancient Greek equivalent of driving for 10 hours to get to a friend's house for a party, only to realise you've been at the wrong address the whole time. It's a huge and embarrassing blunder. The people of Mysia, naturally, aren't thrilled about being invaded, and their king, Telephus, son of the great hero Heracles, leads his army to fight back. A fierce battle erupts. It's a messy, confused affair, a bloody footnote to a war that hasn't even properly begun. In the chaos, the great hero Achilles, ever the formidable warrior, wounds Telephus with his spear. The Mysian king is struck down, but not killed. The Achaean army, realising their mistake, retreats back to their ships, leaving behind the wounded king and a lot of confused locals. The story should end there. Write a simple case of mistaken identity. But this is the world of gods and prophecy, and nothing is ever simple. The wound that Achilles inflicted on Telephus refuses to heal. For years, the king suffers, a constant agonizing pain that no one can cure. Finally, he seeks the advice of an oracle, and the prophecy comes back only the one who inflicted the wound can heal it. This is a fantastic, slightly bizarre, and lesser-known detail that really shows the strangeness of ancient beliefs. So, Telephus, in a moment of desperation, journeys all the way to Greece to find Achilles, the very man who put him in this agonizing predicament. You can picture the scene: this powerful, wounded king, travelling for months just to find the guy who accidentally stabbed him. He finally finds Achilles, and after some negotiation, Achilles agrees to help. The cure, as it turns out, is not a magical herb or a divine incantation, but something far more mundane and, frankly, a bit gross: the rust from the very spear that inflicted the wound. Achilles scrapes the rust into the wound, and Telephus is instantly healed. It's an almost unbelievably simple solution to a years-long problem. And a great piece of folklore, Telephus, now a grateful ally, gives the Achaeans the correct directions to Troy. But by this point, the Achaean army has scattered, the first botched attempt, the long months at sea, and the general sense of disillusionment have all taken their toll. The kings and their men have gone home. What was meant to be a quick campaign has now become a forgotten promise. And so, the years drift by. 1 year, then 2, then 3, a full decade passes. This is a common historical fact, that the initial period of the war was not a continuous siege but a long, fragmented process. But was it really a full 10 years of waiting? Scholars and historians still debate whether this was a literal decade or simply a poetic way of saying a very, very long time. Regardless, the point is the same: the war didn't just start after the gathering at Aulis. It took a long, arduous, and frustrating period of regrouping and rededication. You find yourself back in your home kingdom, having returned with a weary sense of anticlimax. You've had a decade to get back to your life, to your farm, to your family. You've probably put on a few pounds. Your bronze armour is now covered in a fine layer of dust, and the thought of war seems like a distant, bad dream. But then, the messengers come again. Agamemnon and Menelaus are regathering the army. It's time for round 2. This time, the mood is different. The army that assembles at Aulis is a little older, a little wiser, and a lot more cynical. The wide-eyed optimism is gone, replaced by a grim determination. You know what you're getting into now. You've tasted the frustration and futility of the first attempt, but you're also bound by the same oath, and now you're bound by the sheer scale of the undertaking. Too much has been invested to turn back now. Finally, the fleet sets sail for the second time, this time with the correct directions. The voyage is shorter, more direct, and filled with a quiet sense of dread rather than excitement. You're not sailing towards glory anymore. You're sailing towards a job that needs to get done. The hours pass in a slow, monotonous rhythm of the waves, the creaking of the ship, and the quiet conversations of men who have been away from home for far too long. Then, you see it. The legendary walls of Troy. They are immense, rising from the plains like a massive fortress of stone. They look impenetrable, a silent, imposing testament to the strength of the city you're about to attack. The fleet makes its approach, the ships gliding toward the shore, and a new wave of tension washes over you. A new prophecy has been made. The first man to step on Trojan soil will be the first to die. This is the first of many curses and prophecies that will haunt this war. It's a brutal piece of fate, and it creates a moment of terrifying hesitation. No one wants to be the first one off the boat. The ships get closer and closer, and the men stand at the rails, looking at the beach, knowing what awaits the first brave or foolish soul. Then, you see Odysseus, ever the wily strategist, do something unexpected. As his ship gets close to the shore, he throws his shield onto the sand and leaps onto it. He's technically the first one to land, but he hasn't touched the actual soil. He's found a clever, if slightly ridiculous, loophole. The other warriors, however, don't have his cunning. A warrior named Odysseus, eager for glory and perhaps unaware of the prophecy, leaps from his ship. His feet landing on the sand, he becomes the first to die, cut down by the Trojan hero Hector almost instantly. It's a tragic, senseless death that sets a somber tone for the entire siege. The war has finally, officially, begun. The rest of the Achaean army spills onto the beach. You and your fellow warriors get your feet wet in the Aegean Sea one last time before digging your heels into the soil of Troy. There is no triumphant fanfare, no glorious charge, just the grim business of war. You help to drag the ships onto the beach, set up your tents, and begin to build a fortified camp. You're not just here for a battle, you're here for a siege, and as you look up at the towering, silent walls of the city, you know that this is going to be a very long stay. The roar of the sea is now a constant companion, but is joined by the sound of thousands of men building a new home. You've landed on the beach of Troy, and the first order of business isn't to charge the city walls, it's to set up camp. Imagine the largest construction project you've ever seen, but instead of steel and glass, it's wood, canvas, and earth. The air is filled with the rhythmic thump of hammers, the scrape of shovels digging trenches, and the groans of men dragging beach ships further up the sand. The entire Achaean army is working together, creating a fortified base, a city of their own on this foreign soil. Your camp quickly takes shape. A great trench and a wall of earth and wood separate you from the Trojan plains. Inside, the thousands of ships are lined up, creating a makeshift port. Tents stretch out in neat rows, a vast temporary city for all the kings and their men. You find your spot, set up your meagre belongings, and settle into what will be your home for an uncomfortably long time. It's not the glorious, quick war you might have imagined. It's a lot of manual labour, a lot of waiting and a lot of dust. Now, from your new home, you can see them. The fabled walls of Troy, they're immense, rising impossibly high, with massive stone gates that seem to mock your efforts. According to the myths, the walls were built by the gods themselves, by Poseidon and Apollo, after they were forced to serve the Trojan king Laomedon. This is a common historical fact in the mythological sense, and it gives you a real sense of the monumental task ahead. How are you supposed to break down walls that were supposedly built by deities? The sheer size and grandeur of them are intimidating, and you can feel the silent weight of their history bearing down on you and your fellow soldiers. The first few years of the war aren't about a constant, dramatic siege. They're more like a series of smaller, brutal campaigns. You're not just fighting the Trojans, you're fighting their allies. These are the cities and kingdoms that have sworn loyalty to Troy, and they must be dealt with to cut off the city's supply lines and weaken its overall strength. This is a historical fact that often gets glossed over in the big picture stories. The Trojan War was a regional conflict that involved numerous other polities. So, for long stretches. The main activity is not waiting outside the walls, but going on raids. These raids are a mix of routine and terror. You march for days, sometimes weeks, to a distant city. You sack it, you take its treasure, you capture its people, and you burn it to the ground. It's dirty, hard work, and it's a far cry from the idealized duels you've heard about in the songs. The biggest name in these raids is, of course, Achilles. He is a terror on the battlefield, a force of nature. He leads raid after raid, gaining immense wealth and reputation. He sacks city after city, including a place called Lyrnessus, where he takes a beautiful woman named Briseis as his prize. This is a detail that will become incredibly important later, so just keep her name tucked away in the back of your mind. You're also starting to see the harsh realities of this kind of warfare. Remember Philoctetes, one of the Achaean kings well, on the journey to Troy. He was bitten by a poisonous snake. The wound was festering, and the smell was so foul, and his groans of pain so constant, that his fellow commanders couldn't stand it. So, in a move that shows you just how pragmatic and utterly callous these heroes could be, they abandoned him on the island of Lemnos. This is a great, quirky detail that really brings home the brutal pragmatism of the ancient world. You were useful. Now you're a liability. So you get left behind. He's out there, somewhere, with his wound and his famous bow, a forgotten man in the shadow of this great war. It's a somber thought to have as you settle into your tent at night. Life in the camp settles into a monotonous routine. There are long, quiet periods punctuated by moments of extreme violence. You wake up to the heat of the sun, train with your sword or spear, and then you wait. You pass the time gambling with knuckle bones, telling stories, or just staring at the impossibly high walls of Troy. The food is probably not great, and the sanitation is definitely not up to modern standards, so disease is a constant threat. The nights are filled with the sound of the wind, the occasional challenge of a watchman, and the quiet despair of men who are so very, very far from home. This is the truth of the war, not the glorious battles, but the soul-crushing boredom and the quiet, creeping sense of time wasted. And what about the other side? We rarely think about the Trojans inside those walls. For them, it's a different kind of war. They're not waiting to go home. They're waiting to see if their home will be destroyed. They can look out from their walls and see your camp, a constant ugly blot on their beautiful coastline. We know about their great hero, Hector, the son of King Priam, a man who is not a great warrior for glory, but for the sake of his wife Andromache and his son Astyanax. He's fighting to protect his family, a much more relatable motivation than some distant oath or personal honour. The war for them is a daily countdown, a constant source of fear and uncertainty. The sound of your army outside is a low, persistent thrum of dread. This whole 10-year siege is also something that historians still debate. Was it a continuous, grueling blockade for a full decade, with the Achaeans staring at the walls the whole time, or was it more of a series of shorter campaigns, with the Achaean army possibly going home during the winters, only to return the next year? The latter seems more plausible, from a logistical and supply perspective. Either way, the effect is the same. The war stretches on and on, a slow, grinding mill that wears down both sides, physically and mentally. As the sun sets, you sit outside your tent, maybe cleaning your armour or sharpening your sword. The sound of the waves on the beach is a gentle rhythm. In the distance, you can see the watchfires of the Trojans, little pinpricks of light on their massive, imposing walls. They are watching you, just as you are watching them, and in the quiet of the night, it's hard not to wonder what you're all doing here, 1,000 miles from home, waiting for a war to truly begin. The monotony of the early war years is about to be shattered. You've spent so long on raids, in skirmishes, and in the quiet, soul-crushing boredom of camp life that the prospect of a real battle almost feels like a relief. The two armies, The Achaeans and the Trojans are finally arrayed on the plain between your camp and the city walls. The sight is breathtaking and terrifying. Thousands of men, their bronze armour glinting in the sun, stand in disciplined ranks. The air is thick with anticipation, the smell of sweat and fear, and the low rumble of 1,000 warriors shifting their weight. This is the moment you've been waiting for, and dreading, all these years. Suddenly, a Trojan warrior steps out from the ranks. He's young, handsome, and dressed in a way that suggests more attention to fashion than to fighting. It's Paris, the very man who started this whole mess. He's wearing a leopard skin over his shoulders, a bit of an eccentric fashion choice for the battlefield. If you ask me, he steps forward and challenges any of the Achaean heroes to single combat. A hush falls over the two armies. This is a common historical fact in the mythological sense, that wars were sometimes settled by a duel between champions. You can feel the hope ripple through the ranks. Maybe this doesn't have to be a 10-year war after all. Maybe it can end today. Menelaus, the rightful husband of Helen, sees his chance. He leaps from his chariot with a roar of pure, unadulterated fury. This is personal for him. He wants revenge. He wants his wife back, and he wants to end this war on his terms. The two champions, one driven by honour and vengeance, the other by a misplaced sense of bravado, prepare to fight. A truce is called, and a solemn oath is sworn by both sides. Whoever wins the duel wins the war. The victor gets Helen and her treasure, and the two sides can go home, for a moment. You can almost taste the promise of peace. The duel begins, and it's clear from the start that this is no fair fight. Menelaus is a veteran warrior, hardened by years of kingship and battle. Paris, for all his good looks and fancy clothes, is not. Menelaus quickly overpowers him, and you watch as he drags Paris through the dust by the strap of his helmet. A moment of utter humiliation for the Trojan prince, just as Menelaus is about to finish him off. Just as you can feel the entire Achaean army exhale in a collective sigh of relief, something strange happens. A thick, swirling mist descends upon the battlefield, not like a normal fog, but as if it came from nowhere. The mist envelops Paris, and when it clears a moment later, he's gone, vanished. It's Aphrodite, the goddess of love, the very one who promised Paris Helen in the first place, who has whisked him away to safety, leaving the furious Menelaus swinging his sword at thin air. It's a classic deus ex machina, a sudden and convenient divine intervention that shows you, in no uncertain terms, that this war is not going to be decided by mortal men alone. Agamemnon, seeing what happened, immediately claims victory. The duel was over, Paris had been defeated, and the terms of the truce should be honoured. He demands that the Trojans hand over Helen and her treasure. For a moment, it looks like it might work, but the gods, who are still holding grudges over that golden apple, have other plans. Hera and Athena are still furious with Paris and want to see Troy utterly destroyed, so they send Athena down to the battlefield. This is where a little known, but crucial, detail comes in. Athena, in the guise of a Trojan soldier, persuades a Trojan archer named Pandarus to shoot Menelaus. The truce is sacred, but the gods don't care about mortal rules. Pandarus, a skilled archer, takes aim and lets an arrow fly. The arrow strikes Menelaus, not fatally, but it wounds him. The truce is irrevocably broken. The wound isn't serious, but it's enough. The war is back on. But now, it's not just about a stolen wife, it's about a broken oath. The hope of a quick end is gone, shattered by a single, treacherous arrow. You can feel the mood shift instantly. The brief, joyous hope of going home is replaced by a deep sense of anger and betrayal. The Trojans have violated the truce, a grave sin in the ancient world, and now all bets are off. The commanders give the signal, and the two armies clash. The air fills with the sounds of battle, the thunder of chariots, the clang of bronze on bronze, the shouts of men, and the first, terrible cries of the dying. It's a terrifying, chaotic, and brutal scene. You're no longer a spectator, you're in the middle of it. You push forward with your fellow warriors, your heart pounding in your chest, trying to stay alive in this swirling mass of humanity and steel. Was a duel ever truly going to decide the fate of a war of this scale? It's something that historians still debate. Was this just a poetic device used by the bards to create a dramatic moment in the story? Or did the ancients really believe in such a thing? The idea of it is certainly romantic. A one-on-one fight to decide the fate of nations. But the reality is far messier and far more brutal. The intervention of the gods and the breaking of the truce show you just how little control mortals had over their own destinies in this world. The fighting rages on for the rest of the day. You fight until your arms ache and your throat is raw. When darkness finally descends, the battle ends not with a victory for either side, but with the quiet exhaustion of two weary armies. You make your way back to your camp, a new sense of grim reality settling in. The hope is gone. This is a war that will be fought to its bitter end, not with single champions, but with thousands of lives. As you lay in your tent, trying to block out the sounds of the wounded being tended to, you can't help but think that this whole thing could have been over today, but it wasn't. And now, the long, bloody road ahead feels even longer. The war, after the failed duel of Menelaus and Paris, settles into a brutal, day in, day out grind. You spend your time fighting, defending and raiding, and the names of the great heroes begin to stand out from the noise. In this world, the courage and skill of a few individuals can turn the tide of a battle, and one name, in particular, inspires both awe and terror. Achilles, when he's on the field. It feels like the war is moving in your favour. He is a whirlwind of destruction, a force of nature in human form. His very presence is a rallying cry for the Achaeans and a source of dread for the Trojans. He's the one you look to when things are going badly. But the greatest hero is also the one with the biggest ego. You can feel the tension in the camp, the constant rivalry between Achilles and Agamemnon, the king of kings. Agamemnon is the commander, the head of the whole operation, but Achilles is the undisputed greatest warrior. It's a classic case of an alpha-dog conflict. The tipping point comes over a woman named Briseis, a captive Achilles took during a raid. Agamemnon, after having to give up his own captive, a woman named Chryseis, to appease the god Apollo, demands that Achilles give him Briseis to save face. It's a purely political move, but for Achilles, it's a profound dishonour. This is a common historical fact from the myths and the central conflict of the Iliad. You can almost hear the shouting match from your tent. Achilles, his pride wounded beyond repair, refuses. He pulls his sword, ready to kill his own commander, but the goddess Athena intervenes, telling him to back down. So, in a fit of rage, Achilles withdraws from the fighting entirely. He and his men, the formidable Myrmidons, refuse to fight. He just sits in his tent, sulking like a teenager who just got grounded, while the war rages on without him. For all his greatness, his petty pride is also his biggest weakness. The effect of his withdrawal is immediate and devastating, without Achilles and his men. The tide of the war turns. The Trojans, led by their great hero Hector, are suddenly emboldened. They push the Achaeans back, out of the plains and all the way back to the ships on the beach. You feel the panic. The walls of your camp, your home for the past decade, are on the verge of being breached. The Trojans are setting fire to the ships, the very things you need to get home. The war, which seemed to be a stalemate, is now a crushing defeat, all because one man couldn't get over his wounded pride. Achilles is unmoved. He sits and watches, refusing to help. He wants Agamemnon to be humiliated. The old commanders and kings, like Nestor and Odysseus, go to his tent to plead with him, but he's stubborn. He won't budge. He's willing to let his friends die just to prove a point. It's an incredibly dark and frustrating moment to witness, And it shows you how even the greatest heroes are just fallible, petty men at their core. Then, his best friend, a kind and honourable warrior named Patroclus, can't take it anymore. He sees the Achaeans being slaughtered and begs Achilles to let him wear his armour. He says that if the Trojans see Achilles' armour, they'll think Achilles has returned and will fall back in fear. Achilles, perhaps seeing a way to save his friends without compromising his pride, agrees. He gives Patroclus his magnificent, divine armour, but with one specific warning: don't get carried away. Just push the Trojans back to the city walls, but don't fight Hector. Patroclus agrees, and goes into battle wearing Achilles' gear. The plan works perfectly. The Trojans see the armour and panic. They think Achilles has returned, and they flee in terror. Patroclus, carried away by the rush of battle, ignores Achilles' warning. He chases the Trojans all the way to the city gates and fights with a courage that is all his own. And there, he meets Hector, the greatest Trojan warrior. Hector, thinking he is fighting Achilles, engages him in a duel. After a hard fight, Hector kills Patroclus. The body is dragged away, and Hector takes the magnificent armour as his own prize. The news reaches Achilles, and his grief is immediate and earth-shattering. All his anger towards Agamemnon and the Trojans is consumed by a single, searing emotion: vengeance. The death of his friend is the catalyst that brings the unstoppable hero back into the wall. He now has a reason to fight that is bigger than his pride. He receives new, even more magnificent armour from the god Hephaestus, brought to him by his mother Thetis. This new armour shines with a light so bright that it almost hurts to look at, and with that, he's ready. Achilles returns to the battlefield, a terrifying figure of pure, unadulterated rage. He slaughters Trojans indiscriminately, a one-man army of vengeance. He has one goal, and one goal only: to find Hector. Finally, the two meet. Hector, despite his courage, knows he is doomed. He is fighting for his city, his family, and his honour, but Achilles is fighting for a friend's death. The duel is quick and brutal. Achilles, in his rage, is unstoppable. He kills Hector, but his vengeance doesn't stop there. In a truly dishonourable and brutal act, he ties Hector's body to his chariot and drags it around the walls of Troy, a grotesque parade of his victory. This is a crucial detail that shows the dark side of this kind of heroism. And as Hector lies dying, a final, eerie detail comes to pass. He tells Achilles that his own death is near, that he will be killed at these very gates by Paris and the god Apollo. This foreshadowing, a quirky, memorable detail, hangs in the air like a curse. Was Achilles and Hector real? Were they archetypes, one of unstoppable, divine power, the other of noble, human duty, created by the bards? That's something historians still debate, but in that moment, it feels very, very real. The war has now entered a new, grim stage. The greatest Trojan hero is dead, but the Achaean hero is now a monster, his grief having consumed his humanity. The body of Hector is eventually ransomed by his father, King Priam, in a scene of profound sorrow. But the war, is not over. It has only become more terrible. The price of victory is climbing higher and higher, and you can't help but wonder if anyone will ever truly go home whole. The death of Hector brought an end to the most famous duel, but it didn't end the war. Instead, the conflict settles back into a grueling stalemate. The Achaeans are still unable to break through the towering, god-built walls of Troy. You're back to the quiet, monotonous rhythm of camp life, but now it's infused with a new sense of fatigue and a growing despair. You have lost a decade of your life, and for what the greatest Trojan hero is gone, but the war rages on, and you're no closer to going home. And then, the unthinkable happens. The greatest of your own heroes, the seemingly invincible Achilles, is killed. His death isn't a glorious, head-on clash with a mighty warrior. No, It's a surprise attack from a cowardly archer, Paris, the very man who started this entire conflict, guided by the god Apollo. Paris fires a poisoned arrow that strikes Achilles in his one vulnerable spot, his heel, the same heel his mother, Thetis, held when she dipped him in the river Styx to make him invulnerable. It's a quiet, ignominious death for a hero who lived for glory on the battlefield. This is a classic historical fact in the mythological sense, a brutal twist of fate that shows you that no one, not even the son of a goddess, is truly safe from the petty whims of the gods and the cruelty of fate. With Achilles gone, the era of the great, unstoppable warrior is over. The war is no longer a matter of one hero's might overpowering the enemy. The war needs a different kind of hero now, a man of cunning and intelligence rather than brute force. And that man, you now realize, is Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, a man who has always valued his wits over his sword arm. The focus of the Achaean army shifts from endless, futile attacks to a single, audacious plan. Odysseus comes up with it. The idea is so preposterous, so completely out of left field, that it just might work. He proposes building a giant, hollow wooden horse. You and your fellow warriors would build it, a truly monumental task, from the wood of the surrounding forest, and inside this horse, the best of the Achaean warriors would hide, a small, elite strike force. The rest of the army would burn the camp and pretend to sail away, leaving the horse on the beach as a supposed peace offering to the gods. This is, of course, the most famous part of the story, a common historical fact in the mythical telling. The plan is met with both excitement and disbelief, but what other choice do you have? You've been trying to break down those walls for 10 years. It's time for a new approach. The entire army, with a grim determination born of desperation, sets to work building this massive, wooden beast. The sound of swords and hammers fills the air, and slowly, a towering, magnificent horse takes shape, a truly beautiful and terrible work of art. But a giant wooden horse isn't enough. The Trojans, after 10 years of war, are not stupid. They would never just take a strange gift from their enemy. The plan needs a key component: deception, and that's where a lesser known but absolutely crucial detail comes in. A young warrior named Sinon is chosen for the most dangerous part of the plan. He will stay behind after the Achaeans leave, pretending to be a deserter, a victim of Agamemnon's cruelty. His job is to convince the Trojans that the horse is a sacred offering, and that if they bring it inside their city, it will grant them divine favour and make their city invincible. The plan is put into motion. You help to tear down your camp, loading the ships with what little you have left. The Achaean fleet sets sail, but they don't go home. They sail just out of sight, hiding behind a nearby island, waiting on the beach. All that is left is the massive wooden horse and the lone figure of Sinon, his hands bound behind his back, waiting for the Trojans to find him. Inside the walls of Troy, the Trojans are overjoyed. They see the Achaean fleet sailing away and believe the war is finally over. Their long ordeal is finished. They rush down to the beach to see the massive horse, a monument to their supposed victory. Sinon is brought before the Trojan king, Priam, and he spins his web of lies, a masterpiece of deceit. He tells them the horse is a gift for the goddess Athena, a peace offering to atone for a stolen statue. He says it's so big so they won't be able to fit it into the city, thereby ensuring the Achaeans can't steal it back. He says that if they bring it inside, Troy will become invincible. It's a ridiculous story. But after a decade of war, people believe what they want to believe. But there is a voice of reason, a priest named Laocoon, a man of wisdom and skepticism, sees through the ruse. He famously says, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bring gifts." He throws his spear at the horse, a physical act of defiance, and the sound of the warriors hidden inside echoes from the hollow belly of the beast. But before the Trojans can listen to his warning, the gods intervene again. Athena, who wants the plan to succeed, sends 2 massive sea serpents from the ocean. They attack Laocoon and his 2 young sons, coiling around them and crushing them to death in a gruesome and terrifying scene. The Trojans, horrified, take this as a sign from the gods that Laocoon was being punished for disrespecting the sacred offering. So, with their last voice of reason silenced, the Trojans make their fateful decision. They tear down a section of their own supposedly impenetrable walls and, in a moment of tragic celebration, they haul the great wooden horse into the city. They believe they have won. The rest of the day and night are a celebration, a wild party filled with feasting and drinking, a cathartic release of 10 years of pent-up fear and tension. As for you, you're not outside celebrating. You're inside the horse, in the cramped, dark, claustrophobic belly of the beast. You can hear the sounds of the Trojan celebration, the shouts of joy and the music of their pipes, but they're muffled and distorted. You can feel the horse being dragged through the city gates. You are silent, tense, and waiting. The war is not over. It is just about to begin its final, bloody chapter, and as the hours tick by, and the sounds of the drunken Trojans slowly fade, all you can do is wait for the cover of darkness. The long, agonizing wait is over. The sounds of the Trojan victory celebration have died away into the quiet. Heavy darkness of a sleeping city. You are still inside the belly of the wooden horse, cramped and tense, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. All you can hear is the breathing of the other warriors, the rustle of their armor, and the muted whispers of their commanders. It's a silence filled with a terrifying potential, a final, tense moment before everything breaks loose. Then, you feel it, a movement. The latch on the horse's trapdoor is being unlatched from the inside. The trapdoor opens, and a sliver of cold moonlight shines into your claustrophobic world. Odysseus, ever the leader, is the first one out. He gives a quiet, hand-signal command, and one by one, you and your fellow warriors slip silently down the ropes, your feet making no sound as you land on the cobblestone streets of Troy. The air is cold, but you're sweating. It feels surreal, being inside the city you've been staring at for 10 years. Your first objective is not to start the slaughter, it's to open the city gates. The rest of the Achaean army, the main force, is waiting on the ships, just out of sight, just behind the island of Tenedos. They're watching for the signal. So, while a small group of warriors begins the gruesome work of a stealth attack, you move with a detachment of men towards the massive main gates. The guard on duty is probably fast asleep, drunk from the night's festivities. You and your men kill them quickly and silently, and with a great heave, you unbar the massive wooden and bronze gates, the very ones that have kept you out for a decade. The signal fires are lit, and from the direction of the sea, you hear a distant, muted cheer. The rest of the army is coming. The moment the main army pours through the gates, the quiet is over. The city of Troy, which has just celebrated its supposed victory, now descends into a night of unimaginable horror. The air fills with the sounds of chaos, the clang of metal, the shouts of the Achaean warriors, the terrified screams of the Trojans as they are woken from their sleep. You can smell the smoke as the first houses are set on fire, the scent of burning wood and linen mixing with the tang of blood. The sky, which was just moments ago dark and peaceful, now glows with the terrifying orange light of a city on fire. In the midst of this chaos, the heroes you once admired turn into something else entirely. The rules of war, already brutal, are thrown out the window. Vengeance reigns supreme, and you see acts that will forever stain the name of the Achaeans. There is the new hero, Neoptolemus, the son of Achilles. He is as powerful as his father, but without his sense of honour. You see him chase the aged King Priam, the old, defeated man who ruled this great city, into the sanctuary of the temple of Zeus. He kills the old king right there on the altar, a deeply sacrilegious act, showing that even the gods' sanctuaries are no longer sacred. It's not an act of bravery, but an act of pure, unadulterated cruelty. Then there's the tragic figure of Cassandra, the prophetess, the daughter of Priam, who foresaw all this but was cursed so that no one would believe her. She takes refuge at the statue of the goddess Athena, but even that is not enough to save her. You watch, horrified, as a lesser-known Achaean hero, Ajax the Lesser, drags her from the temple and assaults her, an act so terrible that it will bring the direct wrath of the gods down on the Achaean fleet later. The statue of Athena herself is said to have turned away in disgust. But perhaps the most heartbreaking act of all, one that truly shows the viciousness of this victory, is the fate of Astyanax. He is the young son of the great Trojan hero Hector, a boy who is just a child, but to the Achaeans, he is a potential future king, a threat. So, in a grim practical decision, he is torn from the arms of his mother, Andromache, and thrown from the towering walls of Troy. It's a shocking, horrifying detail that you, as a soldier, witness with a sense of numb dread. This isn't a war of heroes anymore, it's a war of monsters. You fight, but it's not a battle, it's a massacre. The Trojans are not prepared, they are taken by surprise. Drunk from celebration, it's less a fight and more a systematic destruction of a city and its people. You move through the streets, the air thick with smoke and the heat of burning buildings, your mind in a daze, trying to make sense of the carnage around you. This is the end of the war. But it doesn't feel like a victory. It feels like a horrible, collective descent into madness. As the night stretches on and the sun begins to rise, you stand in the middle of what was once a great city. Now, it is just a smouldering ruin. The towering walls, once a symbol of its strength, are breached and broken. The houses are a pile of ashes, and the streets are littered with the bodies of men, women, and children. You are exhausted, covered in a mix of ash and blood, and you look around at the other Achaean soldiers, and you see the same haunted, empty look in their eyes. This isn't a moment of triumph. This is the bitter, devastating price of a long-sought revenge. Archaeological evidence shows that the site of ancient Troy, a city now known as Hezarlik, was destroyed by a massive fire around the time the Trojan War is thought to have taken place. So while the mythology is often hard to pin down, the idea of a city being sacked and burned seems to have some basis in historical reality. But the mythology, and your memory, tells you a story not just of fire, but of the destruction of an entire civilization, and the heroes who became its executioners. You stare at the rising sun, the golden light illuminating the broken, ruined city, and you know, deep down, that you will never be the same again. The sun rises on the ruins of Troy, and the horrifying night of the sack is over. The Achaean army, what's left of it, is now a collection of exhausted, shell-shocked men picking through the rubble. You and your fellow warriors are gathering the spoils of war, the treasure of 1,000 years, and herding the last of the Trojan captives onto the ships. But there is no real feeling of victory. The air is heavy with the smell of smoke and death, and the heroes, having accomplished their goal, now have nothing left to do but start squabbling. The collective purpose that held them together for a decade is gone, replaced by individual greed and the overwhelming desire to get home. You can sense the change, a subtle but terrifying shift in the atmosphere. The gods, you can feel it, are not pleased. In the heat of the sack, all the rules were broken, the sanctuaries were desecrated, the old king was killed on an altar, and a princess was assaulted in the very temple of Athena. The divine powers who had watched over you for a decade, sometimes helping, sometimes hindering, are now furious. This is the critical, defining historical fact of the myths that will determine the rest of your story. The victory was a great triumph, but it came at a price that would now be paid in blood and suffering. The time comes to leave. There is no solemn celebration, no proper sacrifice to the gods. no feeling of a job well done. There's just an overwhelming, desperate need to get on the ships and go home. And in this moment of haste and recklessness, the first of many disasters strikes. Agamemnon and his brother Menelaus, the two kings who started this whole thing, get into a heated argument about when to leave. Agamemnon wants to stay a few more days to offer sacrifices and appease the gods. Menelaus just wants to get home. They argue. And the fleet splits. This is a crucial, lesser-known detail, a final act of hubris that sets the stage for a long and terrible journey home. The army that came to Troy together is now leaving in pieces, and the gods, seeing this final insult, unleash their vengeance. The sea, which has been your silent companion for so long, becomes your worst enemy. Terrible. Divine storms descend upon the Achaean fleet. The winds howl with a supernatural fury. The waves rise up like mountains, and the sky is lit with a terrifying, continuous lightning. Your ship is tossed about like a toy in a bathtub, the wood groaning and splintering under the immense force of the ocean. You are no longer a victorious hero. You are a terrified, helpless speck on an angry, endless sea. The sound is deafening, a mix of the wind, the crashing of the waves, and the screams of men being washed overboard. You hear the stories later, whispered in hushed tones whenever the storms finally subside for a moment. You hear how Ajax the Lesser, the very man who assaulted Cassandra, boasted that he had escaped the sea's fury, and that even the gods couldn't stop him. In a flash, the sea god Poseidon, in a fit of rage, split the rock he was standing on and sent him plummeting to his death. It's a harsh, brutal end for a man who deserved it, and it sends a clear message to all of you. No one is safe from the god's wrath. You also hear of the wise Nestor, who made it home safely. His ships unharmed, his pious and respectful nature at Troy had paid off. He was the one who was careful and didn't get caught up in the hubris of the moment. It gives you a small, tiny bit of hope. But for the rest of the heroes, the journeys are long, strange, and filled with disaster. Menelaus, the king whose wife started this whole thing, is blown far off course. He and his men spend years wandering the seas, blown from Egypt to Libya, a slow, grueling punishment for his part in the war. He's essentially on a decade-long world tour, but without any of the fun touristy stuff. And then there is the most famous, and most tragic, homecoming of all, Agamemnon, the king of kings, the man who sacrificed his own daughter, Iphigenia, to get the winds to blow, finally makes it home. But his wife, Clytemnestra, has not forgotten that terrible act. She has taken a lover, Odysseus, and together they have been planning their revenge for 10 long years. You hear later, from the few men who survived, that upon his return, they kill him in his bath, a brutal, dishonourable end for the great commander. The cycle of violence, which started with a broken oath at Troy, has now come full circle to consume the very man who started it. It's a tragic, almost unbelievable story, but it's a perfect illustration of how the war continued to destroy the lives of the heroes long after Troy was a smouldering ruin. You, meanwhile, are lost. Your ship, commanded by the cunning Odysseus, is caught in the storm. The winds are blowing you farther and farther from your home in Ithaca. The sun rises and sets, and all you can see is the endless, angry sea, the victory at Troy, the sack of the city, the decade of fighting. It all feels like a distant, hazy memory. The only reality is the storm, the creaking of the wood, the desperate clinging to the ropes. The homecoming you dreamt of is not a peaceful return to your family and your kingdom. It's the beginning of a long, nightmarish journey of its own. A new kind of war against the wrath of the gods and the cruelty of fate. The storm rages on, but it eventually breaks, leaving your ship and your spirit a wreck. Troy is a distant, haunting memory, and the journey home, which was supposed to be a triumphant return, has become a terrifying odyssey of its own. You are adrift on the open sea, completely lost, with no sense of direction and no idea where you are. This is the final stage of your story, not a glorious end to a great war, but a long, brutal test of your will to survive. Your journey, and that of your clever commander Odysseus, is a winding path of divine challenges and supernatural encounters. The first strange place you land is the land of the lotus eaters. You and a few other men go ashore to find food and water. The locals are not hostile, but they offer you a strange fruit to eat, the lotus flower. It tastes sweet, and you are tempted to try it. But Odysseus warns you. The men who eat the lotus don't want to go home anymore. They forget their families, their purpose, and their past. They just want to stay and eat the flower forever. You watch as a few of your men, mesmerized, have to be dragged back to the ship, tied to the benches, crying as they are pulled away from the one thing that has finally given them peace. It's a sobering reminder that the greatest danger might not be a monster, but the temptation to simply forget everything you've suffered. Next, you land on the island of the Cyclops. It looks like a nice, peaceful place, a beautiful, idyllic island full of sheep and vineyards, but it's home to a tribe of one-eyed giants. You and Odysseus, ever curious, go exploring. You find a massive cave, a veritable cave of wonders, full of cheese, milk, and lamb. You and your men get comfortable, but then the owner returns. It's Polyphemus, a gigantic, terrifying Cyclops. He seals the entrance with a boulder that not even 20 men could move, and in a horrifying moment, he grabs 2 of your men, bashes their heads together, and eats them, right in front of you. This is the most famous part of this journey, a classic, horrific tale. You're trapped, your fate seems sealed, and all you can do is wait for him to return and eat you next. But Odysseus, a man of pure cunning, has a plan. He gets the Cyclops drunk on some strong wine, and when the giant falls asleep, you and the men take a huge sharpened stake, heat the tip in the fire, and plunge it into his one massive eye. The Cyclops screams in agony, but when his fellow Cyclopes hear the noise and ask him who is hurting him, he roars, "Nobody. Nobody's hurting me. He doesn't know that." Odysseus, in a clever trick, told him that his name was Nobody. The other Cyclopes, hearing this, think he's fine and leave him to his groaning. The next morning, Odysseus and your men escape by tying yourselves to the undersides of the Cyclops' sheep as he lets them out to pasture. It's a ridiculous, but brilliant escape that shows how a man with a sharp mind can defeat a monster with brute strength. You face other challenges. You must sail past the sirens, beautiful women whose voices lure sailors to their death on the rocks. Their song is said to be the most beautiful sound in the world, filled with promises of knowledge and glory. But Odysseus, ever the planner, has a solution. He plugs your ears, and those of your men, with beeswax so you can't hear the song. He, however, wants to hear it. So he has you tie him to the mast, so tight that he can't break free, no matter how much he begs and pleads. You see the sheer torment on his face as he listens to the song, but you also see the strength of his will. He endures it for all of you. The long journey takes you to many strange lands, but perhaps the most profound is the visit to the underworld. This is a common historical and mythological fact, and it's a moment of deep reflection. Odysseus goes there to consult the dead prophet Tiresias about how to get home. While he is there, he meets the shades of many of the heroes you fought alongside at Troy. He sees the great hero Achilles, and he asks him if his glorious death was worth it. Achilles' answer is chilling. He says that he would rather be the lowliest slave on earth, a simple farmhand, than be a king among the dead in the underworld. His words hang in the air, a final, definitive judgment on the cost of glory, the whole reason for the war. The endless pursuit of an immortal name is laid bare as a tragic, hollow pursuit. The journey continues for a full 20 years. It's a journey that scholars still debate. Were these places real locations in the Mediterranean, or are they entirely fantastical? A metaphorical journey into the hero's psyche. It's a mystery. But the meaning is clear. The war didn't end when Troy fell. It continued to destroy the lives of the survivors for years, sometimes decades. Afterwards, it's the final cost of victory. Odysseus, a broken, weathered old man, finally makes it home to Ithaca. But even there, the war isn't over. His kingdom is overrun with suitors who want to marry his wife, Penelope, and take his throne. He has to fight for his home, his wife, and his life, all over again. The Trojan War, it turns out, was just the beginning. The true battle was against the scars it left behind. The stories and the battles fade, leaving only the quiet echoes of what was. The heroes are gone, their bodies buried in distant foreign lands. The cities they fought for are dust, but the memory of the war, the stories of their struggles, and the quiet truth of their broken lives, those linger on. An eternal whisper in the dark. Now, the stories are over, the journey is done, the long war is finally, truly over for all of you, and all that's left to do is find some rest. Now, let everything settle down. The walls of Troy fell long ago, and the wooden horse is now just a distant memory. The storms have passed, and the monsters sleep soundly in the deep ocean. Take a deep breath in, and let it out softly. Think about the feeling of a cool breeze blowing across a deserted beach, the gentle sound of the waves like a lullaby. The battles are over. The heroes have found or not found their way back home. The story is complete, and you no longer have to worry about a thing. Let the images of the ships, the swords, and the gods slowly fade from your mind. They are all just old stories now, and they only exist to carry you to sleep. Your eyes are heavy, and your mind is truly at ease. Let the peace of the night embrace you. There is no more war, no more storms. There is only quiet, and sleep is coming.